It's funny. I'm watching Atlanta, right? I'm watching Atlanta. And Paperboy is, he's doing his thing. I don't know if you're watching Donald Glover. He's doing his thing, and he's in episode 3 of this new season. He's in with these. He did a bar mitzvah, and the father ran after Paperboy and is like, "Can you coach my son?" And he's like, "Nah, I ain't got time to do that." And he's like, "I'll pay you $1 million." And Paperboy is like, "Okay, I guess I could show up to coach him." So he shows up to the studio. The little white boy is not even looking at him. And he's like, "I'm Paperboy." He's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, whatever." And he's, doing his little rap thing. And he's like got millions of followers. He's like bigger than Paperboy. And nobody knows who Paperboy is, right? And I'm like, you do something, and I'm not comparing myself to Paperboy because I'm way more accomplished than he ever would be.
Right.
But you get to a point where you've done these things, and it's what have you done lately, and who's hot now? And so I'm never, narcissistic enough to think that people even know who I am, what I've done. So it's always like I'm starting from scratch, and it's fine because I'm gonna let them know.
It should know because you are an OG.
Yeah,
You are a trend, not a trend. You're a trendsetter.
that's true.
You've the work you did in publishing. I mean, not to even talk about the imprint, but the work you did in publishing. People don't know where all these imprints, they're springing up everywhere. They don't know who put in the work in the beginning. So you did your stuff.
So there's forgiveness now as a result of your platitude. So I'm just gonna welcome you to the Karen Hunter Show for the first time. He is the writer of 35 plus books. This latest one I'm so super interested in getting into because I went through the doorway of no return and my big ass couldn't fit through. So I don't know how my ancestors made it through, but he is writing about it, fictionalizing it. The book is called Door of No Return. It is a novel. It came out this week. Let me welcome to the show for the first time the one and only Kwame Alexander. Hello.
Hello
Hi.
there. I am honored to be able to engage with you, Karen Hunter. This is a blessing.
Okay. And again, I didn't know you before here. So I want to spend a little time knowing why you know me. Like what, I know you said you bought the first book, but this is
Sure.
about you. We're gonna get into you, but it's always interesting because the writer world is weird. We are solo individuals that live in our own headspaces and silos, and you're a novelist, so that's a whole other animal. I'm a journalist who parlayed this journalism into writing books, but you create from nothing, which to me is a singular talent, and we tend to be in our own right here with our blinders on. So
Right.
tell me about you.
Well, I am a writer. I'm a storyteller, but I didn't create this out of nothing, as it were. I come out of a tradition. And so when I think about the circles that you have run in and the circles that I have run in, we've been in many of the same circles, in many of the same rooms, whether it was, the Black Pack Party back in the 90s, or whether it was, you know, um, a quarterly Black book review party or some sort of event. I started my own publishing company in 1995, and I started it because I wanted to publish Black poets. And the idea was my father owned a book publishing company. I grew up in a place called Brooklyn, New York, on a street called President Street between New York and Brooklyn Avenue, attending a school called Uhuru Sasa Shule, which stands for Freedom Now School. And it was an independent Black institution that nurtured, that inspired, that educated, informed, and empowered young Black boys and girls. And I grew up in this school. I grew up in this community where, Reverend Herbert Daughtry was leading marches over the Brooklyn Bridge. I grew up in this community with G2 Weusi leading the East. I grew up in this community of Black people who were empowering and letting Black kids know that you matter, that you are important. And so my father, after he was headmaster of this school I went to, he moved into book publishing. And so for the first 15 years of my life, I worked for my father. I learned the ins and outs of book publishing, and whether it meant working trade shows, standing behind a table selling books at the London Black Book Fair of Radical Book Publishers in London, England every year, selling copies of the African Writers series published by Heinemann, whether it meant selling copies of Sheikh Anta Diop books, selling copies of Alice Walker's The Color Purple when everybody was mad at Alice. All the men were mad at Alice because they felt like she was degrading and disrespecting Black men. So I grew up in this sort of cultural, environment of Black is beautiful. And I also grew up in this very business-minded household of working for a mother and a father who owned a book publishing company. So after I graduated from college at Virginia Tech, having studied with Nikki Giovanni for 3 years, I decided I'm going to be a poet. And so I went back naturally to my father and said, can we publish poetry now? And he said, poetry doesn't sell.
So that's right. Your father knows business.
and I said, well, I can't work for you anymore. I'm going to have to do my own thing because I want to publish poetry, and you've empowered me and taught me how to do this, but now you're not going to let me execute it. So I resigned from working for my dad. He gave me a check for $1,700, and I started my own company and began to publish Black poets. And that's when I got into sort of the Black publishing zeitgeist. So that's when I made my way into the industry as a small press, 23 years old, thinking I know what I'm doing. And that was sort of the beginning for me.
I am impressed for so many reasons, because I was going to ask you, I'm big on legacy, I feel like batons are just on the ground everywhere. Nobody's picked them up and taken things to the next level, which is why we always have to start again and again and again, as if we're the first people to ever do things, which is why momentum of memory, what you're talking about right now, is so important. Your father had a book publishing company. When I started my imprint at Simon & Schuster, my goal was to learn enough to become bigger than Simon & Schuster. That was the goal, right? To have a publishing and I'm still going to do it, that rivals, because there are no Black Simon & Schuster's or Random House or Penguin now. Now it's only 4 bigs, right? And I think everything old is new again. So publishing is going to be important again at the way it used to be when it was, in its heyday. Leaving your father's publishing house to start your own, which again, my God, amazing. Any thought to ever go back? Because now 30 books in, you are New York Times bestseller. You have awards for your books. Do you feel like you sold out a little bit, Kwame?
First of all, that is the most frank and blunt question I've ever been asked. And so I got to appreciate it on that level. Secondly, I love the way you set me up for that question. That was like, you are a journalist. You are a journalist. Third, I will say that, there's a great book that Howard University Press published. May they rest in peace. Called Propaganda and Aesthetics. And it talks about the history of journalism and Black publishing. And, there were many publishing companies that had the potential to rival the big 4, whether it be, what Charles did with Amistad, which eventually sold to HarperCollins. Howard University Press itself was publishing Black authors, and not just academics, but publishing sort of laypersons en masse. Hakeem Adabudi, Third World Press, was arguably a major publisher in the late 60s and the 70s when you talk about publishing authors like Sheikh Anta Diop, Ayi Kwei Armah, Francis Cress Welsing, and being able to sell millions of books. So the issue is we have never been able to scale.
Right.
We've never been able to scale. We've never been able to move out of the community, as it were. And there were certainly times where you saw, this could possibly happen, whether it be when Third World Press published The Covenant.
Tavis
Smiley's book, which was selling, which topped the New York Times bestsellers list. So we've always had an inkling of possibility when it comes to that. And so I still hold out hope that it can happen. In 2017, I founded an imprint called Versify at a place called Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, which is no longer in existence because HarperCollins bought it, and now it's Clarion Books. But I started an imprint, so that was 20 years after I had closed down my small press. I found my way back to publishing because it's always been in my blood, as we've discussed. So the short answer is, I see myself moving in a direction where, yes, I'm going to make opportunities available to other writers who don't have to suffer and struggle and work as hard as I did to get where I am. So yes, I do plan on doing that. Do I feel like I've sold out? Wow, that's a great question. Do I feel like I've sold out? I don't feel like it at all. I feel like,
and let me just say this, not, it's a question I ask myself, right? Every day. What's the purpose here? So I have shifted in the last 5 years, and radio has helped to realize that the sum total of my life's existence will be 100 years from now, not now. So everything that I built now is for a time that I won't be here, for people that I won't know, so that they will have, I feel like somebody's got to make the commitment of making sure that there's the blueprint to build upon. So no one has to say, oh, I'm the first or before, and I'm learning every day people that have done things that Boucher, the first person to get a PhD in this country. I just learned about him last week, Black man. And he died with an unmarked grave with no children. And no one, this name will not be immortalized, except if maybe somebody like me will do it. And then do a, docuseries or something to make sure that you will never forget this man, right? Physics from Yale, physics PhD from Yale. We don't know him. So I think about that even in publishing, because, the lion and the hunter, and I happen to be one, the hunter gets to tell the story. We have to tell our story. So I appreciate mainstream publishing, having been in it for 10 years. But I also understand that even they will push you in directions that may not be authentic, but I feel like you have figured out the formula. So I'm gonna just say this, Kwame Alexander, as I'm reading this, I'm like, I think you figured out the story. First of all, Sankofa, you got the Sankofa bird, first chapter 1, the story of Often. And you write, there was even a time many seasons ago when our people were the sole supplier of the purest and most valuable gold in the world. The river was bedded with enough gold to make a century of royal stools for the Asante kings, 1,000 shiny bracelets for their wives. Then came the foreigners, invaders disguised as friends, pretending to be students of our way, with only one lesson to learn: how to steal our fortunes. And I think about us as the fortunes today, right? Every single industry, from social media to fashion to, of course, movies, television, that we have, we have, I was looking at the stock market today. Twitter's up today, but we know there's no Twitter without Black Twitter, and there's no Twitter without the infusion of all of that from the Arab Spring, all of the cultural awakenings. But Twitter couldn't make that happen. We made that happen, and we don't get any market share for it. You're getting paid very handsomely to now put these stories into the mouths and the heads and the ears and the eyes of young people. The Door of No Return. Kwame, born on Saturday. Tell us about this book.
Wow. So I will say this, and I don't really tell people this, but I was actually born on Wednesday.
So I love it. I love Black people, because we just know we love the name Kwame. We don't know what it means. We don't know it comes out of the Akan, out of a Dinkra. We don't know anything about Ghana, but we're gonna name our children Kwame. I love it.
My father was in school at the University of Ghana, Legon, and so he was very much influenced. And I still have a copy of the book by
Nkrumah?
Kwame Nkrumah.
Come on, yes.
And so he named me after Nkrumah, the first president of independent Ghana in 1957. So that's where that name came from. I've always wanted to go to Ghana. I've always wanted to visit it. And I had the opportunity to go in 2012 with a friend of mine who became the queen mother of a village. And I sat, I sat in this village with the young people, with the elders, just sort of soaking it up, trying to sort of find my homecoming, to find that connection that Black people often talk about when they make that that journey to Africa, you know, that motherland. And so I was trying to find that, and I was talking to some guys, some fellas who we were under a coconut tree, as it were. And as I thought about it, I said, I think the connection that I can sort of establish is through slavery. Let me talk about slavery, because that's got to be the thread. That's the thing that's going to bring us. That's what we know. So I said, yo, what y'all know about slavery? And the guys were like, we know that it was the bad ones who were taken away. I said, whoa. So I wanted to explore that, right? And I wanted to get into a conversation about this. And they followed up with the following question. Do you listen to Kanye West?
Child.
And have you had jollof rice? And in that moment, it occurs to me that perhaps slavery is not the connection, is not the major thing that's going to bring us together, is not the beginning of our journey. And how often are we taught that 1619 is our beginning? And when in fact, Karen, it is our middle. And so that was my first of 11 trips to Ghana. And it was during those trips where I said, I want to write a book about the beginning. I want to talk about a beginning that is not the stereotype, that is not the narrative that's been drilled in our heads all these years. Let's talk about a kid who has a crush on a girl, and he lives in the village, and he has a cousin who's a bully who has a crush on the same girl, and he's got a family, and they all live in the same compound, and he can't get enough red. I don't know if you've been to Ghana or had red, but that palm bean stew is off the chain, Karen.
Come on.
Let's talk about a kid who wants some red, and he wants a second helping, but his brother eats all the food. Let's talk about a kid who doesn't like his teacher. Let's talk about a Black boy growing up, experiencing the woes and the wonders of the world. Let's talk about the humanity of our people, of our ancestors, before we get into the middle passage, as it were. Let's talk about before. That's where the book came from.
The door of no return. In this moment, I've fallen in love with you, Kwame Alexander.
The feeling is always mutual. It took you 30 years to catch up.
It did.
30 years ago, so it's all good.
Oh man.